He left the interview room without saying a word. Daniel Walker didn't slam the door. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for feedback or beg for reconsideration. He simply nodded once, thanked them for their time, and walked out with his shoulders straight and his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. The hallway on the 15th floor of Horizon Tower felt colder than usual. Glass walls reflected his image as he passed. Borrowed navy suit, sleeves a little too long, shoes polished within an inch of their life. A man trying to look like he belonged in a world that had just quietly decided he didn't. Inside the conference room, Thomas Bennett, the head of human resources, was already closing Daniel's file. No college degree, no formal certifications, current position, night janitor. Those words had weighed more than the 8 years Daniel spent managing angry hotel guests, training staff, and solving problems before they became disasters. They weighed more than the fact that he knew that building better than most executives who worked in it. They weighed more than the truth. Daniel reached the elevator and pressed the button. As he waited, his hands began to shake. He slipped them into his pocket so no one would see. When the doors finally opened, he stepped inside alone. The descent felt longer than it should have. He stared at his reflection in the mirrored steel doors and barely recognized himself. Not because he looked poor, not because he looked tired, but because he looked invisible. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, Daniel had already decided something. He wasn't going to turn around. He wasn't going to ask for another chance. He wasn't going to humiliate himself for people who had already made up their minds. The lobby of Horizon Global Corporation was flooded with morning light. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls, glinting off marble floors Daniel had mopped hundreds of times at 2 a.m, when the building belonged to him alone. Now it belonged to everyone else. He crossed the space slowly, each step echoing. Employees passed by in tailored suits, coffee in hand, conversations about meetings and deadlines floating past him like he didn't exist. None of them recognized the man who scrubbed their footprints from the floor every night. Daniel reached the glass doors and pushed them open. Cold air hit his face. The city roared outside. Traffic, voices, life moving forward without him. Behind him, Horizon Tower rose into the sky, untouchable and indifferent. This was it, he told himself. You tried. He stepped onto the sidewalk. Daniel Walker. The voice cut through the noise like a blade. For a split second, he thought he imagined it. Then it came again, louder this time, urgent. Daniel Walker, please stop. He turned. Inside the lobby, a woman was walking quickly toward the doors, heels striking the marble with sharp purpose. Her dark suit fit perfectly, her posture unyielding. Security shifted instinctively out of her way. Daniel recognized her face instantly. Victoria Hayes, CEO of Horizon Global Corporation, the woman whose photo hung in the company newsletter, the woman whose decisions moved millions of dollars and thousands of lives. The woman Daniel had never expected to know his name. She reached the doorway and stopped just a few feet from him, breath slightly unsteady, eyes locked on his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel felt exposed, standing there, one foot on the sidewalk, one foot still inside the building that had just rejected him. Please, Victoria said again, more quietly now. Come back inside. Every instinct in Daniel screamed no. He had already walked away. He had protected what little dignity he had left. Turning back felt like reopening a wound he'd just managed to close. But there was something in her eyes that made him hesitate. It wasn't pity, it wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. He let the door close behind him. They moved to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the security desk and the steady flow of employees. Victoria studied him for a long moment before speaking. I watched your interview, she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then you know how it ended. Yes, she replied evenly. And I know how it should have ended. He looked at her, unsure whether to feel angry or relieved. Why are you telling me this? Because 2 months ago, she said, one of our most important partners nearly collapsed in this very lobby. Daniel's mind flashed back instantly. An elderly woman, pale, unsteady on her feet. Eleanor Whitman. He'd noticed the signs right away. Low blood sugar. He'd given her a piece of candy from his pocket, guided her to a chair, called security for water and assistance. He hadn't thought twice about it. He never did. Victoria continued. That woman later told me a janitor named Daniel Walker noticed what no one else did, that he stayed calm, that he treated her with dignity. Daniel swallowed. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, Victoria said. That's why it mattered. She met his eyes. When I saw your face on the interview feed this morning, I recognized you immediately, and then I watched my company dismiss you. Daniel felt something inside his chest crack. Not loudly, but deeply. So what is this? He asked. A thank you? A favor? No, Victoria said firmly. It's accountability. She straightened. I just watched a qualified man be rejected because he didn't fit someone's idea of what professional looks like. That's not who we claim to be. Daniel took a step back. I don't want charity. She nodded once. Good, because that's not what this is. Before he could respond, Victoria pulled out her phone and made a call. Send Thomas Bennett and the interview panel to the lobby, she said calmly. Now. She ended the call and looked back at Daniel. You're free to leave, she told him. No one would blame you. The automatic doors reflected his image again. A tired man, a father. A man who had spent years cleaning up after others without being seen. He thought about Evan, about the hospital bills on the kitchen counter, about the inhaler they rationed because the refill cost too much, about the promise he made himself after his wife died, that he would never stop fighting, even when it felt pointless. I'll stay, Daniel said. Victoria's gaze softened just slightly. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Thomas Bennett stepped out, followed by his assistant and the front desk operations manager. Confusion crossed their faces when they saw Daniel standing beside the CEO. Victoria didn't waste time. I want an explanation, she said, her voice steady but sharp. Why was Daniel Walker rejected? Thomas adjusted his tie. Based on standard criteria. Be specific. He lacks a college degree, formal training. Is a degree required for the position? Victoria asked. No, he admitted. Then what exactly disqualified him? Silence stretched. Daniel felt every second of it. Victoria turned to him. Mr. Walker, she said, are you willing to have this conversation continue? He looked at the faces that had judged him, then back at her. Yes. And as the tension thickened in the marble-floored lobby, Daniel realized something. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about being seen and whether standing his ground, right here and right now, was the moment everything changed. The lobby fell into a strange, heavy silence. Daniel Walker could hear his own breathing. Slow, controlled. He kept his hands at his sides, even though his fingers wanted to curl into fists. Across from him, Thomas Bennett stood stiff, his polished confidence beginning to crack under the weight of Victoria Hayes' gaze. I'm waiting, Victoria said calmly. Thomas cleared his throat. We evaluated Mr. Walker against our internal standards. Victoria tilted her head slightly. Internal standards that aren't written in the job description? They're implied, Thomas replied. Implied by whom? She asked. No one answered. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not relief, not triumph, something quieter. He had spent years learning how to stand still while people talked over him, around him, about him. This time they were talking to him. Victoria turned toward the operations manager. Do you agree with this decision? The man hesitated. We have to consider company image. Front desk staff are the first impression. Daniel felt the words land exactly where he expected them to. Image. He had heard that word his entire life, usually spoken by people who had never missed a meal or counted pills in an inhaler. Victoria nodded once, slowly. Tell me, she said, what does professionalism look like? The operations manager opened his mouth, then closed it. Victoria didn't press him. She turned back to Thomas. You reviewed Mr. Walker's resume, did you not? Yes. And you saw 8 years of customer service management at a hotel? Yes. You saw documented experience handling complaints, training staff, de-escalating conflicts? Yes. And you saw that he's worked in this building for 3 years without a single performance issue? That's janitorial work, Thomas said quickly. Too quickly. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Explain the difference. Thomas shifted his weight. It's not client-facing in the same way. Daniel's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady when Victoria looked at him. Mr. Walker, would you mind explaining your hotel experience? Daniel nodded. I worked front desk and guest relations when guests were angry, scared, or frustrated. I was the one they spoke to first. I handled overbookings, billing disputes, emergencies. I trained new hires. I stayed calm because panic makes problems worse. Victoria looked back at Thomas. Would you say that's relevant? Thomas hesitated. Yes. Then why was he rejected? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Daniel realized something then. This wasn't just uncomfortable for them. It was exposing. And for the first time, he wasn't the one shrinking. Victoria exhaled slowly. You didn't reject him because he lacked skill, she said. You rejected him because he didn't fit your expectation of who belongs at the front desk. No one denied it. That is bias, she continued, whether you intended it or not. The assistant spoke up, her voice tight. We were following precedent. Then the precedent is wrong, Victoria said flatly. Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions rise in his chest. Validation, yes, but also exhaustion. Being proven right didn't erase the years of being overlooked. Victoria turned to him again. Mr. Walker, I want you to know something. You didn't lose that interview. The process failed you. Daniel swallowed. What happens now? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she dismissed the panel with a glance. I'll speak with you privately. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. The three of them retreated toward the elevator, their footsteps quick, their shoulders tense. As the doors closed, Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Victoria gestured toward a smaller conference room nearby. Inside, the lighting was softer. No glass walls, no audience. They sat across from each other. I should apologize, Victoria said. I should have caught this earlier. Daniel shook his head. You didn't have to do any of this. Yes, she replied quietly. I did. She leaned back. This company prides itself on values, fairness, integrity. But values mean nothing if they only apply to people who already fit the mold. Daniel looked down at his hands. I don't want special treatment. I'm not offering it, she said. I'm offering a fair chance. She explained the plan carefully. A 2-month paid training program with a customer service management team. Full benefits from day one. A transition into the front desk role afterward, assuming performance met expectations. Daniel listened in silence. It sounded unreal, too generous, too sudden. Why me? He asked finally. Victoria studied him. Because you've already proven something most resumes can't show. Character, composure, the ability to see people. Daniel thought of Evan, of the quiet patience in his son's eyes, of nights spent cleaning floors while worrying if the inhaler would last until payday. I'll accept, he said, but not because you stopped me in the lobby. Why then? Because if I walk away now, Daniel said, I'm teaching my son that dignity means knowing when to quit. I want him to see what it looks like to stand and be counted. Victoria smiled, just a little. Then we understand each other. The next weeks passed in a blur. Daniel told Evan carefully, choosing his words like stepping stones across deep water. He didn't promise miracles, he promised effort. Training began on the 10th floor. The other trainees were younger. All had degrees. None looked at him unkindly, but curiosity lingered in their eyes. Daniel didn't mind. He focused on the work, role-playing scenarios, conflict resolution, communication under pressure. It all felt familiar, like muscle memory waking up after years of sleep. By the end of the first week, the instructor had started calling on him more often. By the second, the others were watching how he handled tense moments. Daniel stayed late to practice systems. He asked questions. He took notes. He didn't pretend to know what he didn't. At night, he still mopped floors for a while, finishing out his transition. Pushing the mop across the lobby one last time felt surreal. He moved slower, more deliberately, as if saying goodbye to a version of himself. On his first official day behind the front desk, Daniel arrived early. The suit fit properly this time. He stood where he had once cleaned, watching the morning light spill across the marble. People passed. Some recognized him, most didn't, and for the first time that didn't hurt. At lunch he sat alone until someone joined him. Then another. Conversation came slowly, naturally. Late in the afternoon, Victoria passed through the lobby. She met his eyes and nodded once. No applause, no announcement, just acknowledgement. As Daniel headed home that evening, he typed a message to Evan. He didn't say he had won, he said he hadn't given up. The first morning, Daniel Walker worked the front desk alone. The lobby felt different. Not because the marble floors had changed or because the sunlight through the glass walls looked brighter. It felt different because, for the first time in years, Daniel wasn't moving through the space unnoticed. He was standing still, present, trusted. He arrived early, as he always did. Habit from years of night shifts. He adjusted his tie, glanced at his reflection in the polished surface behind the desk, and took a slow breath. This suit was his. Bought with his first real paycheck. Not borrowed, not oversized. It fit the way this moment finally did. The morning rush came fast. Visitors checking in, employees running late, a delivery driver frustrated about a missing authorization. Daniel handled each moment calmly, the same way he had handled angry hotel guests years ago. He listened. He didn't rush. He solved what could be solved and explained what couldn't. When a woman raised her voice about a delayed meeting, Daniel didn't flinch. He offered her a seat, called upstairs, and followed up until the issue was resolved. She left thanking him, not out of politeness, but relief. Around mid-morning, an elderly client arrived early and looked confused. Daniel recognized the signs instantly. He guided her to a chair, brought water, and stayed with her until her assistant arrived. No one told him to do it. He didn't need permission. Across the lobby, a few employees watched, quietly, differently. By lunchtime, exhaustion settled into his shoulders. But it was a good kind, the kind that comes from being useful, from being needed. Daniel sat in the cafeteria with the sandwich he had packed at home. For a moment, he ate alone. Then someone sat across from him, then another. Conversation started slow, cautious, then easier. They talked about schedules, about the building, about small frustrations that suddenly felt shared. That afternoon, Victoria Hayes passed through the lobby with her executive team. She didn't stop. She didn't say his name. She met his eyes and gave a single nod. Daniel nodded back. That was all. He clocked out as the sky outside darkened, the city alive with movement and noise. Stepping through the glass doors into the evening air, he felt tired in a way that didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. On the bus ride home, he stared out the window, watching the city blur past. He thought about how close he had come to walking away for good, how easy it would have been to let that rejection define him. At home, Evan was waiting at the table, homework spread out, inhaler beside his notebook. Daniel sat down across from him and told him about his day. Not the confrontation, not the lobby scene, just the work. Evan listened carefully, then asked, "Did you like it?" Daniel smiled. "Yeah, I did." That night, Daniel paid the hospital bill online, the full amount, no payment plan, no waiting. The confirmation email sat quietly in his inbox, simple and final. He closed the laptop and leaned back, eyes closed, letting the moment sink in. Weeks passed. Daniel settled into the rhythm of his new role. Some days were smooth, others weren't, but he showed up the same way every time. Calm, prepared, present. Not everyone approved. He felt it in sideways looks, in conversations that stopped when he entered the room. But he also felt something else. Respect. Slowly earned. Solid. One afternoon, Thomas Bennett passed through the lobby. Their eyes met briefly. Thomas nodded once, stiffly, then looked away. Daniel didn't feel satisfaction. He felt closure. On a Friday evening, as Daniel packed up to leave, one of the newer employees thanked him for helping with a difficult visitor earlier that week. Daniel shrugged it off, but the words stayed with him on the ride home. Later that night, after Evan had gone to sleep, Daniel stood by the window of their small apartment, city lights glowing below. He thought about the years he spent cleaning floors in silence, about how close he came to believing that was all he was meant for. He wasn't angry anymore. He understood something now. Dignity wasn't about walking away or staying silent. It was about knowing your worth, even when others refused to see it. And sometimes, change didn't come from shouting. It came from standing your ground long enough for the truth to surface. Daniel sent a short message to Evan's phone, knowing he'd read it in the morning. Dad didn't win. Dad didn't quit. As you sit with this ending, do you think Daniel made the right choice by staying instead of walking away? And does this story feel realistic to you, or does it challenge what you believe about fairness at work? If you like this story, comment the number 100 below so I know you stayed until the end. Tell me which country you're watching from. And if this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who might need to hear it today.